Okay, so in the first part of our lecture, we talked about Keynes's major contribution, which was effective demand, and then we decided that we were going to talk about his consumption theory, okay? Now, as I mentioned, Keynes's consumption theory actually was about that much of the book, right? It's about that many pages, say 70 pages. His investment theory, on the other hand, was about 300 pages, okay? It's the major portion of the book, because remember, Keynes was trying to figure out what determined employment. That is, why did employment and output continually seem to move in cycles, okay? In other words, why did employment and output go up, and then why did it go down so constantly? He looked at consumption. Could it be consumption? And he said, no, it can't be consumption because, as we've seen, it's relatively stable, right? You spend about the same amount on autonomous consumption every month, and you spend about the same on discretionary consumption every month as well. I mean, some months more than others, but it's about the same. So consumption is relatively stable. So then what ends up causing the economy to move so cyclically? Okay, why does it go up and then down? Why do we have booms, then busts, where employment and output go up, and then they go down very quickly, okay? The conclusion Keynes came to was that it must be investment, okay? He thought investment was incredibly volatile, okay? So that's the core of the general theory, right? The name of his book is The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. And the core of that general theory is that it's changes in investment that lead to changes in employment and output, okay? Now I should mention, Keynes actually, the title, The General Theory, he stole it from Einstein, okay? Einstein, a few years earlier, right, this is 1936, a few years earlier, had created the general theory of relativity, okay? Keynes took that idea. He said, look, my theory is a general theory, okay? He said the neoclassical theory, it's a special case, it's wrong, and it's only applicable when an economy is at full employment. And as we'll see, there's really no reason to expect an economy to be at full employment. Instead, he said that he had the general theory, which was applicable to a capitalist system, whether you were at full employment or massive unemployment. He said no matter what, his theory was correct, okay? So, in the next hour or so, we're going to talk about Keynes's investment theory, then tie consumption and investment together to see what he thought, how he got effective demand, what led him to realize it was effective demand that mattered, and not the neoclassical labor market, okay? And then what some of his policy conclusions were, okay? Now, it's important to remember, this is an economist who was a neoclassical, right? He was trained in the neoclassical labor market, quantity theory of money, production function, Say's law. He used to believe in all that. But at the height of the Great Depression, 25% unemployment, things like that, he decided that can't be right, so he broke free of that, rejected it, using the multiplier, as we've seen, right? Remember the multiplier, where investment leads to savings through changes in income. So he said, you know what? The neoclassical theory has to be wrong. Instead, it must be spending that matters, okay? So now we're going to talk about his theory of investment. And I mentioned at the top of part 1 of our lecture that he had a financial theory of investment, okay? He developed something called a capital asset pricing model, okay? Capital asset pricing model. That is his theory of what leads to investment. We're going to go over it now, okay? Or what causes changes in investment, okay? So, investment and the prices of capital assets. This is the handout called Keynes's General Theory, okay? So, we need to start off by defining liquidity, okay? Liquidity, what is it? Liquidity is simply how easily something can be turned into cash, okay? That's it. How easily can something be turned into cash? How easily can I take this magic marker and turn it into cash versus how easily can I take this cell phone and turn it into cash? By definition, the most liquid instrument there is cash, right? This can be turned into cash very easily because it already is cash. Okay? So some things are more liquid than others, right? It's a lot easier to take a United States government bond. It's a lot easier to take a bond and turn it into cash than it is to take a fire truck and turn it into cash, right? If you wanted to sell a government bond and get cash for it, just walk over to Wall Street, right? There's someone there who will buy a government bond and turn it into cash for you. On the other hand, if you had a fire truck, which I'm taking extreme examples, of course, but if you had a fire truck and tried to sell it to someone, you walk down the street, nobody's going to buy a fire truck, maybe the fire department, but that's the only group of people who are going to buy a fire truck, okay? So liquidity is how easily something can be turned into cash, and every single object in the economy has different degrees of liquidity. Things that are very liquid, like cash, bonds, you say they are liquid. On the other hand, something that cannot easily be turned into cash, like a fire truck, you would say that it is illiquid. Okay? I-L-L-I-Q-U-I-D. Illiquid. Okay? So now let's talk about investments. Every investment has a payment stream. Okay? That is, an iron smelter pays you money over time. What's an iron smelter? It's the things, the huge machines that you've seen in factories, you've seen pictures of it when you look at pictures of factories in Pittsburgh. It's the thing you take the molten metal and you put it into, right? It melts it down and it turns it into beams of iron, okay, or steel, okay? An iron smelter has a stream of payments attached to it. If you invested in an iron smelter or you invest in a car factory, that's going to allow you to produce steel or cars, which you can then sell every month. And every month you're going to end up getting money for that. So every investment has a payment stream that comes with it. Let's take cars. With cars, you buy a car making machine. And with the car making machine, let's say in the first month you make 12 cars and you sell them for $10,000 each. So in the first month, your payment stream was $120,000. In the second month, you made 15 cars that sold for $10,000. The payment stream would then be $150,000. Okay? So every investment comes with a payment stream. Okay? Now remember, the point of capitalism, at least Keynes said capitalism is a monetary production economy. So the point of capitalism is to start with money and turn it into more money, right? You want M prime to be greater than M. Okay? You have this sum of money and I want to buy something which I can then sell that will give me more money than I started with. Okay? So when you're looking to invest, when you want to make investments, you have to decide which the best one is. You have to decide which investment is best. How do you do that? It's the one you think is going to allow you to make the most money relative to what you started with. Okay? So, you have to figure out where you want to invest. In other words, what's going to give you the highest return possible? Does that mean you should buy an iron smelter? Should you buy car making machines? Or should you simply buy treasury bonds, right? Should you buy U.S. government bonds? U.S. government bonds are called treasury bonds. Okay? Do you simply want to hold money, right? The object is to take money and turn it into more money. But if you think all the investments are really bad, right? If you're going to end up losing money in those investments, maybe you'll just hold on to that stack of money, because at least in 3 months, you're going to have the same amount that you start with if you hold it. Okay? Remember, it's better to not make any money than to lose money. So you might just decide to hold on to it. Okay. So now we come to the capital asset pricing model of Keynes. Keynes said that every single asset in an economy possesses 4 characteristics. Okay? We're only really going to be concerned with 3 of them. The 4th one we can leave off. Okay? I'm not even going to cover it, but it's on the handout if you want to look at it. Okay? Keynes said all assets, okay, all durable assets, everything you can possibly buy or invest in, everything you could invest, has these 4 characteristics. The first one he labeled Q. Okay? Q is the prospective stream of returns. Okay? The prospective stream of returns. So, if you're thinking about buying a car-making machine, right? Q would be how much money you expect to make in the first month, and then in the second month, and then in the third month. Okay? So if you're thinking about buying a car-making machine, it's the amount of money you can get by selling cars, by selling those cars. That would be your Q. It's your prospective return. Okay? If you were thinking about buying a bond, it would be how much, or a stock. It's how much money are you going to earn each month from owning that stock or bond. That would be your prospective return. Okay? C, he called carrying cost. A carrying cost is the amount of money you need to dedicate to maintaining your investment. Okay? So, if you had a bond, right? If you bought a stock, if you bought some stock in Apple, do you need to spend a lot of money in order to maintain that investment? No, right? It's just a piece of paper that says you own Apple or IBM, right? You don't need to spend a lot to upkeep it. On the other hand, if you bought an iron smelter or a car making machine, right, these things break down. There's wear and tear on them. So you need to figure out, and what you do is you estimate, and entrepreneurs usually estimate these things, how much money you're going to have to spend to maintain your investment. Okay? So Q is the amount of money you think you're going to earn from your investment, while C is the cost you think you're going to have to pay in order to maintain it. Okay? So C is what you're going to earn from it, Q is what you're going to earn from it, while C is what you have to pay in order to maintain it. Okay? Finally, there's L. L is very, very important. L, Keynes called the liquidity premium. He said that all assets have a liquidity premium. Okay? Well, some of them do more than others. Okay? He said L is how liquid an investment is at a point in time. Okay? So right now, if you had a fire truck and you needed to sell it, how easily could you turn it into cash? Okay, that's what L is. On the other hand, if you had Apple stock and you needed to sell it, how quickly could you turn it into cash? Right? Obviously, it would be a lot easier to sell Apple stock than it would be to a fire truck, than to sell a fire truck. Okay? So he says every asset has a liquidity premium. So Keynes did these 3 things, just to summarize. Q, how much money you're going to earn from your investment, right? Every month, if you buy a machine or a bond or a stock, right, you're going to earn some amount of money every single month. That is Q. The total amount of money there is Q. C, the carrying cost, is how much you are going to have to dedicate to maintaining that investment. Right? A car-making machine breaks down, it gets rust, things like that. So you have to pay money in order to maintain it. So Q is how much you're taking in, C is how much you're paying out, and L is how easily can you sell this investment if you needed to right now. Okay? So I made this investment in Apple. No problem. I can get rid of it if I need to. I made an investment in a car making machine. Can I get rid of it right now? Maybe. Okay? You'd have to talk to Ford. Keynes said, all assets, the total return for all assets, okay, so every single asset that you could possibly invest in, their total return is Q minus C plus L. Okay? So it's the return of all assets is how much money is it going to earn me? Q. How much money is it going to earn me? Minus how much do I have to pay out? Plus L. Okay? How easily can I get rid of it? If you add those three numbers up, you have the total return of an asset. Okay? So an iron smelter could have a nice return. Money could have a better return. Apple stock could have a great return. Okay? But the point is, if you add up Q minus C plus L, so Apple has a Q minus C plus L. The iron smelter has Q minus C plus L. A car making machine has a Q, a C, and an L. Money has a Q, a C, and an L. Okay? So, if you add those up for each investment, so if you add up Q, C, and L for each investment, you get each particular investment's total return. That's very, very important. Okay? So, now we need to look at an example of an iron smelter versus money. Okay? Why would you buy an iron smelter, or why would you maybe choose money, right? What am I going to end up investing in? Am I going to buy an iron smelter and turn into Andrew Carnegie? Or am I going to just invest in money? Am I going to hold money? Okay? In a boom, let's start with an iron smelter. In a boom, right, so the economy's doing really well. In a boom, Q is going to be very large for an iron smelter. Okay? Why? Because there's going to be a demand for steel, right? The economy's booming, people are building buildings, roads, bridges, things like that. So if you own an iron smelter, then during a boom, Q is going to be very large, right? Because the economy's going, people need steel. So therefore, if I have a machine that makes steel, I'm going to be doing quite well. I'm going to make a lot of money from that. However, C is also pretty high, right? I mean, C, if I'm going to be running my iron smelters all the time, then I'm probably going to have to pay some money to fix them when they break down, right? Maybe a leak develops, maybe it gets too hot, maybe they rust, things like that. So I'm going to have to pay some money to maintain my iron smelters. So I'm going to make a lot of money, Q, right? My Q is going to be very high, but C is also going to be positive. I'm going to have to pay out some money to maintain my investment. And L, how liquid will an iron smelter be? L is going to be pretty small, right? Because you can't just sell an iron smelter to anyone, right? You need to find someone who actually wants to buy an iron smelter, even in a boom, okay? You can't just walk down the street and sell it. So L will be small. So this makes Q minus C plus L slightly positive, right? You're going to make a lot of money. You're going to make a lot of money from Q, but you're going to have to pay out some money for C. So Q minus C is small. It's positive, but it's small. And L is 0, right? So Q minus C plus L is positive, but small. Okay? Let's talk about money. Money has a very, very low Q, right? just holding money. By money, I mean this. Right? Just a dollar bill. Right? Money doesn't turn into other money, to more money. Okay? You have just a Q. There's no Q. I have this dollar bill, but I can't use it to produce more dollar bills in the way that an iron smelter can produce steel, which will give me more money than I started with. Okay? Money has a low Q. C is also very low. Okay? C is very low, right? Because I don't have to pay anything to make sure this keeps working. It's a piece of paper. Here, that's what it is. I can even rip it in half and it's still good. Right? You can't rip an iron smelter in half and still use it. So the carrying cost for money is quite low. However, L is extraordinarily high. Right? How liquid is money? It's the most liquid thing there is. So L is very, very high. So the total return, Q minus C plus L, is positive. Okay? So we have two positives here. We have the iron smelter, which has a positive return, and we have money, which has a positive return. So which one should you invest in? An iron smelter or money? Should you just hold money? Okay? That depends on your expectations. Okay? And expectations is a difference that Keynes has from the neoclassicals. The neoclassicals, if you remember the neoclassical model, Keynes, or the neoclassicals didn't talk about expectations once. We didn't need to talk about it. The only thing the neoclassicals believe about expectations is that everyone knows the real wage at all times, okay? Which is fairly unrealistic. Keynes has a whole theory about expectations, and he wrote 2 chapters on them. Keynes had short and long-run expectations. We're only going to focus on long-run expectations because that's what's relevant for investment. Okay? So, long-run expectations is the amount of money one can expect for making an investment today. Okay? So if you were to make an investment right now, how much do you expect to make back? That would be your long-run expectations. Okay? In other words, how much money do you expect to receive for giving it up today? Right? How much money, how much M prime do you expect to make for parting with it, for giving it up today? Okay? In other words, should you buy an iron smelter? Do you expect to make a lot of money? You have a sum of money right here, and you're going to buy an iron smelter, and then that will give you more money. Okay? Well, is that M prime going to be greater than M? If you expect it will be, then you'll buy the iron smelter. But if you think you're going to end up losing money, you'll just hang on to this sum you have right here. Okay? So Keynes said, in a boom, it's exciting to invest in illiquid things, right? In a boom, people are more willing to invest in illiquid things like iron smelters and car machines. Okay? During a boom, people are willing to do that. Why? Because they expect that Q will be very, very large. Right? You're going to be buying an iron smelter, and that is very illiquid. But we're in a boom. So people are going to need steel to build buildings and roads and bridges, things like that. So, since people need steel, I might as well invest in an iron smelter, right? Even though it's illiquid, I'm going to make a lot of money from this. Okay? Same thing with a car machine. You know anyone you could sell a car making machine to? Of course not. But in a boom, when the economy's doing well, people are going to buy more cars. So, if you have car making machines, then what you would do is you're going to go buy them because you're going to sell more cars, okay? Even though they're very, very illiquid. In a boom, you don't worry about getting stuck with the iron smelter, right? Or the car making machine. You don't worry about, well, you know, if things go wrong, I'm never going to be able to sell this, right? You don't worry about that because it's a boom. The economy's doing well, okay? If the economy ever went bad, well, then you're going to be stuck with an iron smelter. But the economy's not bad. It's doing really well right now. So I'm going to buy the iron smelter and have my Q, right, my expected returns. I'm going to make a lot of returns, which is going to make up for the fact that it's illiquid. Okay? In a bust, Q goes down, right? In a bust, if you're in a slump, if the economy's doing poorly, nobody's buying cars, nobody needs steel. So your Q, your expected profits, your expected return, goes way down, right? If it was a bust, nobody's building roads, buildings, or bridges. So nobody needs steel. So I have this machine that makes steel, but nobody's buying any steel. So this machine is worthless. So I'm not going to make much revenue from this. So my Qs go way down. So I make sure my investment decision doesn't lose money, okay? In a bust, you want to make sure you don't lose money. So what do? I'm not going to buy the iron smelter. I'm just going to hold on to my money, right? In a bust, you want to hold on to money because it's liquid, right? The idea is you want to take a sum of money and turn it into more money. But at a minimum, you don't want to lose this sum of money, right? You start with 500 bucks, you want to turn it into $1,000. But the last thing you want is to see your $500 turn into $200, right? So if you think the future is going to be bad, you keep holding on to your cash instead of investing it, okay? So in a bust, what you do is you hold money, because in a bust, you want L more than you want Q. Okay? So this is an important point we're coming to, and I'm going to shut this off for 1 second. In a boom, don't worry about this for right now. We're going to come to that in about 10 minutes. But in a boom, you think you're going to make a lot of money from your investments, so you don't really worry about how liquid they are. So in a boom, you think Q is greater than L. Okay? If Q is greater than L, if the amount of money you think you are going to make outweighs the loss of liquidity, right? You're not going to be able to sell this thing, but who cares? I'm going to make a lot of money from it. Okay? Well, then you're going to end up investing. Okay? If Q is greater than L, you're going to end up investing. If people invest, that raises the level of spending. That raises effective demand. If effective demand goes up, more jobs get created, right? It's the simple thing we were talking about at the beginning of the first part of the lecture. If Q is greater than L, then what you expect to happen is you're going to make a lot of money. Who cares if it's not liquid, right? If this investment is illiquid, I'm making a lot of money. So what you end up doing is you invest, which raises the level of spending, and spending creates sales, spending creates income, income creates sales, sales creates jobs, right? So if Q is greater than L, if enough people think Q is greater than L, then people invest, which means more people are hired, right? It creates more jobs. So if Q is greater than L, more people get hired and the economy booms. Okay? Output and employment go up. On the other hand, if people suddenly say, you know, I don't know about the future of the economy, things could be a little shaky, I don't want to buy a car making machine or an iron smelter because I might get stuck with it, right? And who wants to get stuck with an iron smelter? Instead, I have a sum of money here and I want to just hold on to this money. Okay? Well, if that happens, that means Q is less than L. And Q is less than L. If Q is less than L, then what people are going to do is they're going to hold money. If people hold money, and we discussed this in part 1 of the lecture as well, if people hold money, then no one's spending. If no one's spending, then there's no sales. And if there's no sales, what do you need workers for? So if Q is less than L, what you end up having is unemployment. So we can write here, employment down. Okay. So what we can write is, if Q is greater than L, N, which is employment, consider that employment. If Q is greater than L, employment goes up, right? If people decide that the amount of money they're going to make is greater than what they care about liquidity, right? Who cares about liquidity, how quickly I can turn something into cash? I'm going to make a lot of money from an iron smelter. So if Q is greater than L, people invest. People invest, then employment goes up. But if people are unsure about the future, if they don't know what's going to happen, well, then Q will be less than L. If Q is less than L, then people hold money. And if people hold money, then there's less spending, which means you don't need as many workers. So employment goes down, right? Employment goes down. Okay? Okay? So Keynes said that the economy has uncertainty, okay? Which is also a difference between the textbook Keynesians and the neoclassicals versus Keynes. Okay? The textbook Keynesians and the neoclassicals say that each investment has a probability distribution, which we're going to talk about in next week's lecture. But Keynes said that the economy has uncertainty. Okay? Nobody knows what's going to happen. Okay? And with that, because of that, sometimes people will decide that they want to just hold cash. Okay? It's safer to hold cash than it might be to buy an iron smelter. Okay? So, in that way, okay, because of this QL relationship, is Q greater than L, which creates employment, or is Q less than L, which creates unemployment? Because of this dynamic, Keynes said that money rules the roost. Okay? Money sets the standard against which all investments have to be judged. Okay? Basically, what you do when you have an investment, you have a sum of money, and you look at, okay, if I invest it in the stock market, or if I loan it to people, what is that interest rate? Let's say it's 5%. Okay? So you say to yourself, well, I could make 5% simply by loaning my money out. Okay? And I get to hold on to my money, right? I haven't had to go buy a car making machine, right? I have my money and it's right here. I just put it in the stock market or I loaned it to someone and I can get it back if I want to. So I have my money. You can make 5% on that investment. Or you can make 10% by buying a car making machine. Well, if you can make 10% buying a car making machine or 5% by loaning it to someone, you're going to go with 10%, right? You're going to make more money. But the point is, all investments are judged by money. Money sets the standard for all investments. If you were going to make 5% with a car making machine and 5% loaning your money out, you're going to loan your money out. Because there's no chance of you getting stuck with a car machine. Instead, you still have your cash. Okay? Okay? So now, it's important to remember as well, when you buy a car machine, right? Let's say I bought a car making machine or an iron smelter. That requires people to actually work the machine, right? You have to have someone who pours the steel into the mill and then ships it off as beams, things like that. Or a car making machine, a car factory, right? You need people to work the drills and the assembly line, okay? Versus, if you loan out money, you don't need any employment, okay? So investing in machines creates employment, but money doesn't create employment, okay? So what you end up having is this paradoxical situation where money sets the standard against which all investments are judged, right? If you can make 5% here, but 10% there, you're going to invest 10%, you're going to invest in 10%, and you'll be adding employment in the process, right? If Q is greater than L, employment goes up. Why? Because people have to work those machines. But if Q is less than L, let's say a car machine's only going to make 3% and loaning money makes 5%, then you're going to loan out your money for 5%, right? But that doesn't add to employment at all. Okay? What it does is it simply goes over to another party or into the stock market, and now there's just money there, right? But it doesn't require anyone to work machines for it. Okay? So it doesn't add to employment. Keynes said, and this is what I'm starting to get at here with money ruling the roost, investment will only be undertaken to the point at which the return on investment is equal to the return on money. Okay? You're only going to undertake investment to the point at which the return from real investment is equal to the return on money. Okay? So you can loan out money at 5%, or you can buy a car factory at 10%. Well, the more car factories you buy, the return starts going down, right? Car factories become more abundant, right? The more abundant something becomes, the less valuable it is, so its return starts going down. And people will only invest, let's say this is 10% and this is 5%. People are only going to invest until the return on investments are equal to the return on money. So they're both 5%. At that point, people are going to prefer to hold money, right? Why is that? Well, because with money, I'm not going to lose any of it, right? If I have a stack of cash, I have a stack of cash. Whereas if I decide to invest at 5% and buy a car making machine, I might lose all of my money. Okay? So, in that way, money sets the standard against which all other investments are judged, right? 10%, 2%, 11%, 1%. Okay? You're only going to invest in projects, right? You're only going to undertake investments that have a return greater than the return on money. Okay? If a particular investment has a return greater than that on money, you will undertake that project. If it has a return less than the investment on money, then you're not going to undertake it. Okay? Keynes said there is no reason, we're not going to really get into why, it's not appropriate for this class, but if you go on to intermediate, you'll probably encounter the reasons there. Okay? But Keynes said there's no reason to believe that this level, where the return on investment is equal to the return on money, okay? He said there's no reason to expect that to be the full employment level of output. Okay? In other words, you have consumption, right? Consumption is currently 70% of the US economy. Okay? We said this in the first lecture. Consumption is 70% of the US economy. Currently, investment is 15% of the US economy. Okay? So, together that's only 85%. Right? Why is that? Why isn't investment 30%, which would give us 100? Well, Keynes said the reason is the return on investments, on productive investments, ones that add employment, that return becomes equal to the return on money, okay, before you get to full employment. Okay? For those who want to look it up, it's called the zero elasticity of production and the zero elasticity of substitution. But you're not responsible for that in this class, and we're not going to talk about it any longer. But the reason is this rate falls, right? It goes 10%, 9%, 8%, 7%, 6%, 5%. And when the return on car making machines falls, it becomes equal to the return on money. Well, once they're both equal, people are going to start holding money. And money does not add to employment. Okay? Right? Holding money does not create jobs. Only spending can create jobs. So therefore, what Keynes said was it's highly unlikely when these two rates become equal, there will be full employment. He said there's no reason to expect that to be the full employment level of output. Okay? So if we put those two together, if we put the level of consumption and the level of investment together, we get effective demand. Okay? So that wraps up our Keynes's investment theory. That, what we just talked about, was a bird's eye view of Keynes's investment theory. Okay? If you combine consumption with investment, this spending with this spending, you get the total level of spending, which Keynes called effective demand. Okay? Effective demand is what determines the level of output. Okay? I wrote here, since consumption is relatively stable, if the return on investment becomes equal to the return on money, so if the return on investment becomes equal to the return on money before full employment, that means there will be involuntary unemployment. Okay? So consumption plus investment is effective demand. We talked about consumption earlier, so we can keep that sort of separate over here, right? Just consumption, it's stable. But investment, if the return on investments become equal to the return on money before we get to full employment, then consumption plus investment will never allow us to reach full employment. Okay? It means you'll be stuck with involuntary unemployment. Some people will want jobs, but they won't be able to get them because the level of spending is not high enough. Okay? This means if there is unemployment, okay, if there is unemployment, that means effective demand is too low. If there is, which is a good way of thinking about it, if there's unemployment, the first thought Keynes would have is, well, effective demand is too low. Or if there's unemployment, spending is too low. How do you get rid of the unemployment? Raise spending. Okay? This is where Keynes echoes Marx and the whole left side of our history of thought table. Okay? Keynes sounds a lot like Marx and the whole left side of our history of thought table that says capitalism inherently creates unemployment. Okay? And so if capitalism inherently creates unemployment, that means it inherently creates poverty. Okay? It's not, which in turn, right, it creates poverty because if you're unemployed, you have no income. If you have no income, you're poor. Okay? So, it's because the return on investment falls faster than the return on money. Investment falls short of what's needed to secure full employment. Okay? So this is where Keynes sort of became the left side of our history of thought table, where he said capitalism is flawed, okay? Which makes him disagree with the neoclassicals. Now remember, I mentioned Keynes was trying to save capitalism. He wasn't trying to turn everyone into a socialist. But the point is that what he wanted to do was point out it's flawed. Okay? It needs policies to fix it. Where Marx wanted to overthrow the whole system, Keynes just said, look, now that we know what the problem is, it's investment. Investment falls short of full employment. Well, now we just need to figure out how to get to full employment. How do we get to full employment? We've got to raise the level of spending. Okay? So, what can we do about this? Keynes said three things. We can decrease the interest rate to zero. Okay? If you drop the interest rate to zero, right? So we have our productive investments and we have money. If you make the interest rate, the return on money, zero, well then instead of productive investments getting stuck at 5%, right? Before we had 5% and 5%, instead of getting stuck there, if the interest rate becomes zero, then you can have people buy car-making machines that will return 4%, 3%, 2%, 1%, right? So you will have a lot more investments that become profitable if you drop the interest rate. If you make the interest rate zero, then what you end up with is more investment. Okay? But Keynes still said that won't always work. We probably need two other solutions. Oh no. Okay. Since the computer decided to shut off, I'll just tell them to you. The first one, Keynes said, was increased government spending. Okay? If people aren't going to consume more and businesses aren't going to invest more to get us to full employment, well then the government needs to spend to get us to full employment. Okay? And I'll go over this graph in a second. Finally, Keynes said we need tax cuts. Okay? Tax cuts, or lower taxes, will encourage people to consume and invest more. Okay? So, what have I drawn here? Well, Keynes said that a supply curve looks like this. Okay? He said, for the most part, oh, and I need to move this. Keynes said that for the most part, a supply curve looks like this, right? Because think about it. It's horizontal, which means the price stays the same no matter how much the quantity is, which is very similar to the way you encounter the world. When you bought a phone, the price of the next phone stayed the same. When you bought a bottle of water from a vending machine, the price of the next bottle stayed the same. Okay? So what Keynes said is, no matter what the quantity, the price stays the same. Okay? He said it's demand. This is a demand curve. He said demand is what makes the economy move. So if you get stuck, NQ stands for employment and output. So NQ, if you're at a level of employment and output that is not the full employment level, which is why it's NQF, right? It's the full employment level of output. If you get stuck below that point, once people have consumed everything they're going to consume, and businesses have invested everything they're going to invest, well then you might need the government to spend. What that would do is it shifts the demand curve outwards. And he said you need to do that until you get to full employment. Okay? So Keynes's three big policies were drop the interest rate to 0 so that certain investments become profitable. He said you need to cut taxes so that you encourage more consumption. Okay? And third, if that doesn't work, you need government spending to increase. Okay? So that's Keynes in a nutshell. There's a lot in his book, but that's the core of the general theory: consumption, investment, and most importantly, effective demand.